Hortus Oasis Landscape Design welcomes you to tree selection and planting for Central Florida. This is Stephen Pategas. My wife Kristen and I provide landscape design and landscape architecture services. When selecting a tree, choose the type of tree for Central Florida. We are in Zone 9B, appropriate for space, soil, and light conditions. Select quality trees, plant properly, water consistently to establish them, and trim them properly over their hopefully long lives. It can be useful to know the botanical name of a tree before you try to select it. There are two names typically, genus and species, as in Magnolia grandiflora. There may also be additional names when there's a cultivar. In this case, Magnolia grandiflora Little Gem, which designates a smaller cultivar. There's a few tree no-nos to be aware of. Do not plant invasive trees. I'll be sharing a few of those with you. Remove them from your property and ask your neighbors to remove them from their property as well. They tend to find their ways into natural areas and have an impact on wildlife since they supplant native trees, which can provide more beneficial habitat for them. The Chinese tralow tree has foliage that turns orangey in the fall and has berries as shown here. The Chinaberry tree is also an invasive. And the camphor tree is found in many areas throughout Central Florida. Many communities have listed them as invasive in their tree ordinances, and they do not require a tree permit for removal. When selecting a tree, make sure that the tree has full branching. If your tree is a balled and burlapped tree instead of a tree that comes in a container, make sure that the fabric around the root ball is biodegradable. A good way to test that is to put a flame to it to see if it melts. In that case, it needs to be removed. If it's biodegradable, it won't melt. It would be burlap. Strangling roots are a big problem on trees. Make sure it doesn't have a root anything like this around its trunk. When planting a tree, make sure to plant them at a safe distance from the house. This ligustrum tree obviously is a little bit too close, and it should be in a large enough planting space for tree roots. Our house had a problem with a street tree during Hurricane Jeanne. By the third hurricane in 2004, the ground was saturated and the tree was weakened from the continuous winds. Good practices to follow include find the root flare, otherwise known as the top main root, and plant the tree either at grade or 2 inches above grade so that either of these are exposed. Otherwise, the tree will suffer with too much soil on top of its root ball. The best way to do that before planting a tree is to check in the nursery container to find that top main root. When planting a tree, do not dig the hole any deeper than the depth of the root ball. That's why it's important to find the top main root or the root flare prior to planting the tree. Make sure it's on a compacted base. Excavate the sides to loosen the soil. Do not add any soil amendments unless you have really poor soils. So you want to make sure that that is at least 2 inches above the grade to the side of the tree. For a smaller tree, stake the tree as shown. This is a tree that's under a 2-inch caliper, and that would be the diameter of the trunk at about that height. For a multi-trunk tree, attach it to various trunks. The saucer of the tree should be placed at the edge of the root ball, just within it, so that when water is placed within this saucer, it drains down into the root ball and not around the edges. Keep the mulch 4 to 6 inches from the trunk of the tree when you place mulch on it, and do no more than about 1 inch so that rainfall can make its way down into the soil. Now let's take a look at the trees. The river birch reaches a height of about 30 feet with about a 25-foot spread. It's an upright tree. It is deciduous, which means that it loses its leaves for part of the year. And you can find it as either a single or a multi-trunk. It has a little fall foliage color, and the trunk itself has exfoliating bark. So it's got some texture to it, which makes it attractive. And it's also a native to Florida. The French tree, otherwise known as old man's beard, is a smaller tree. It grows slowly to about 15 feet to perhaps 20 feet in height. It's also deciduous, has berries for wildlife, and the berries follow these blooms, which typically occur prior to the leaves coming out. And it is a little fragrant, but you would have to be really close to the blossom to pick up on it. It's also native to Florida. The loquat is an interesting tree. It reaches about 15 to 20 feet in height and spread. It's an evergreen tree. It has white, fragrant blooms, and it also has edible fruits, which have some multiple seeds in them. This small evergreen holly is a good specimen. It actually stays in a pyramidal shape and reaches about 6 to 8 feet in height. There's a close-up of the foliage. The native Ilex fumitoria, more commonly known as the Japan holly, reaches 10 to 15 feet in height, has a spread of about 8 to 10 feet. It's typically grown as a multi-trunk and has white flowers in the spring. If it's a female, it'll have red berries in the fall, which is very beneficial for wildlife. Here are the flowers. Here are those very attractive red berries that the birds love. It grows in a wide range of soils. There's a version that's upright and columnar called Scarlet's Peak that reaches about 20 feet in height, and since it's a female, it has red berries. A cultivar called Pendula, or the Weeping Japan holly, reaches a height of 20 to 25 feet and also comes in male and female versions. The crepe myrtle comes in a range of sizes and flower colors. So select the color that best pleases you and make sure that you get the one that grows to the proper height. That'll help prevent what is called crepe murder. As you can see here, thick branches were trimmed off. Instead, try this. called pencil pruning. Allow the tree to go to the proper height and only trim branches that are, say, the thickness of a pencil. You'll get many blooms, however, you still may need to do some trimming to remove crossing branches. The ligustrum tree is best when hand pruned instead of sheared. Reaches about 10 to 12 feet overall. Also takes a range of soils. Here's a sheared version, which blocks a lot of the light from reaching the inside the tree and actually shortens the life of it. The sweet gum is a Florida native. Reaches about 60 to 70 feet in height, about 30 to 40 feet wide, so this would be a large canopy tree, as opposed to some of the other smaller trees, which are called understory trees because you could find them growing under larger canopy trees. This is a conical and upright in habit. It also takes a range of soils. It does get some foliage color in the fall. The southern magnolia is an evergreen native canopy tree. It has numerous cultivars, and some of which may reach heights of 50 to 60 feet. It has fragrant white blossoms that are very showy, and they develop these seed pods which contain numerous bright red seeds that attract songbirds and provide them a valuable resource. The little gem magnolia is one cultivar of it that reaches about 20 feet in height. It has an extended blooming season and has smaller leaves. The sand live oak is a smaller version of our live oak. It has smaller leaves and is good for planting in smaller spaces. Here's a live oak when it is younger, when it's starting to mature, and when it's mature. Here you see it on the edge of a water body, which shows how it can take some moist conditions. This can get rather large, 40 to 50 feet in height, maybe 65 feet wide. It's evergreen, has acorns that's really good for wildlife, and grows in a variety of conditions, also one of our natives. The bold cypress, which you often see close to water bodies, is deciduous. It does lose its leaves for part of the year. And you can see how it turns from a pyramidal shape into a much more upright and spreading shape with maturity. It also has fabulous seasonal fall color. It's a fabulous native. And if you're frightened about having cypress knees on your property, note that they typically form only in wet areas. They take moisture and they're also very drought tolerant. So it makes a fabulous canopy tree. The winged elm is a great Florida native, reaching about 25 to 35 feet in height. Space these at about 20 feet apart. It is deciduous. It's great for wildlife because it has all these quirky protrusions on its branches. So inside there's lots and lots of places for birds to nest. And it gives them good cover from raptors who may be hunting them. It's also a good tree to grow in alkaline soils, so it makes a good tree in parking lots. The last tree in the collection is the Hortus viburnum. This is a native, and you may know it as a shrub. But as a small understory tree, this one reaches about 10 to 15 feet in height and spread. It's evergreen, and it has showy white flowers that are followed by black berries. Grow it in the sun or the partial shade in wet, dry soil conditions. Choose the proper type of tree for Central Florida and pay attention to the space, soil, and light conditions. Select quality trees, making sure they don't have circling roots, they have a full canopy, and plant them properly at the proper depth. Water them consistently to get them established, and trim them properly over their lives. Thank you for joining me. Make sure you select the proper tree and plant one or more for yourself and for future generations.